Hello, everyone. Welcome to St. Louis County Library's Adult Summer Reading Club program, Sensational Summer Reads. We're so glad to have you join us this evening to hear about some really fun summer reads that you might check out later this summer or actually all throughout the year. There are a lot of really great books that are great to read year round. So before we get started with our picks, I just want to go over some housekeeping. So I'm Sarah. I'm an adult services librarian here at St. Louis County Library. And so welcome. Tonight's program is in a webinar format. So that means that your camera and microphone are not active. So no one can see or hear you, but you should be able to hear and see us. So if you can't, please move a bit closer to your router, or sometimes it helps if you leave and then rejoin the program. But you can ask us some questions via chat. So there's going to be a little box that looks like a speech bubble. If you click on that, you can type in some questions to the chat, and we will have some time for some questions at the end as time allows. So as I said, tonight's presenters, I'm Sarah. I'm an adult services librarian. I'm joined tonight by Harry, who also works in adult services Readers Advisory. So Readers Advisory, Harry and I do matchmaking between readers and books. That's like, we do the personalized reading service, which I'll talk about a bit later, the book discussion kits, some book groups. And then we're also joined tonight by Aaron from the Rock Road branch and Sarah J from the Sax branch. So we're so glad that they can join us tonight. All of tonight's titles are available either in print or e-media, or some of them from both, through our regular catalog, Hoopla or Overdrive. And we do have a handout tonight. So I'm going to take just a second here and I'm going to drop this handout into the chat. So just a moment. All right, so I have put a link to the handout into the chat. If you click on that button, it will download. It may take a second to download, and then you can open it from your downloads folder. Or I've heard if you click on it a second time after you've downloaded it, you can, it'll open. I'll also be sending out this handout in the follow-up email. So if you're on a device where you can't open the handout, no big deal. We're recording tonight's session, and we will be, I'll be attaching the handout to that follow-up email when the recording is available. And I see a hand raised. If you have a question, please go ahead and put that question into the chat, and we'll handle it at the end when we have time. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So my first pick is A Song for You and I by Kay O'Neill. And I'll say that all of my picks tonight are kind of adventure themed. I think of summer as like a time for, adventure. Maybe you go on vacation, and if you can't, you can always go on an adventure from your chair by reading a book. So mine are all kind of adventure themed. And this first pick definitely has adventure in it. So it's a fantasy graphic novel about a novice ranger named Rowan who feels that they have a lot to prove before their upcoming initiation ceremony to become an official ranger. Rangers help keep people safe, and they have a special relationship with their flying horses. So it's really devastating when, in an attempt to show off, Rowan pushes some boundaries and defies protocol, and their horse ends up injured. After that, Rowan is given a landbound assignment that they feel is kind of beneath them and possibly a punishment. But this assignment ends up allowing them to explore who they really are, why they want to become a ranger, and all while making a new friend and maybe more along the way. I love all of Kay O'Neill's work, though they're technically for children, so this will be shelved in the children's graphic novel area. The art is just absolutely gorgeous, as you can see from the cover here, and there are universal themes around self-acceptance and living in harmony with others and with the natural world that I think people of all ages can really relate to. And like in a Studio Ghibli film, there are these like wordless moments sprinkled throughout the book with beautiful landscapes and quiet personal scenes that express even more than dialogue could. So if you are into cozy fantasy and you want a really quick but meaningful read, then definitely check this one out. Okay. My next pick is A Letter to the Luminous Deep by Sylvie Cathrall. And In this book, Sid lives in a famous underwater house called the Deep House. And due to some mental health issues, it's really difficult for her to deal with crowds and loud places. And so she has become the caretaker of this house while her more outgoing siblings pursue their academic careers. And one day, a mysterious structure appears in her underwater garden. And so she writes to upcoming young scholar Henry Clell to request his insight into this. And while visiting the Deep House to investigate the structure, there is a sea quake, and the house, along with E and Henry, are lost. A year later, E's sister Sophie and Henry's brother Viren write to each other to try and kind of piece together what may have happened. And their letters, along with the letters and journal entries from E and Henry, unravel this mystery over the course of the novel. And it also reveals the very sweet romance between E and Henry that blossomed in the time leading up to the disaster. If you love light academia novels, then I highly recommend this one. The writing is really beautiful, and each character's voice shines through in their correspondence. This watery world and its academic centric society are just so original, and you get some hints as to the mythical and maybe real backstory for this society that is more thoroughly explored in the sequel, which just recently came out and is also wonderful. So definitely check out this book if you are looking for an enchanting deep sea adventure. Okay, my next pick is The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leong. And in this novel, Tao is a fortune teller who travels from town to town, living out of her wagon with only her trusty mule for companionship. But Tao tells only small fortunes, so like where you might find a lost object, even though she suspects that she might have stronger powers. She doesn't want to risk her quiet life or face up to the possible consequences of making bigger predictions known. However, when two former mercenaries help her out on the road when there's this big downed tree, um, yeah, things become a lot more complicated for her because they ask her for help in finding their missing daughter in return for help, the missing daughter of one of the two mercenaries. And then it gets even more complicated when a young baker and her cat join the caravan too. And Tao is starting to think, is all this companionship really worth the hassle? But eventually, Tao has to face her past and rely on these new friends when they get drawn into politics and power plays that they don't fully understand. When I read cozy fantasy, I want there to be more than just whimsical vibes. I want there to be personal stakes and emotional depth too, and this one brings all of that and more. Although there is a small romantic subplot of one of the side characters, the main focus is on adventure and on Tao's personal growth. So if you like your cozy without too much romance, then this would be a good pick. And I would definitely put this book right up there with paragons of the cozy fantasy genre like Legends and Lattes and The House in the Cerulean Sea. So if you like those, then definitely check this one out. Okay. My final three picks are all nonfiction, actually. And this book, Custodian of Wonders by Elliot Stein. Stein is a BBC journalist and travel writer, and he takes you on a journey around the world to learn about 10 different people who are some of the last to carry out very unique cultural practices or protect historical objects. And he began this journey when he met Bala Kuyote, a Malian jelly or bard who has made a career in popular and folk music, but he comes from this unbroken line of royal jellies who carry the history of the Malian people, kind of like a living library. Coyote invites him to travel to Mali with him and his family to see the Sosa Bala, which is a sacred balophone. A balophone is like, it's kind of like a xylophone, but it's made with gourds. It's very cool. So the Sosa Bala is the sacred balophone at the heart of this tradition, and it's only taken out and played once a year. So this starts Stein on this journey around the world in search of these unique traditions that are on the brink of vanishing. And he meets others, such as this Indian family that creates mirrors from a secret metal alloy that allow you to see your true self. The last Incan bridge master who rebuilds this historical grass bridge each year. A British beekeeper who keeps the British custom of, quote, telling the bees the important news of the day. And many of these people live with this tension between joy and sorrow of knowing that these traditions may become extinct when their lives or careers end. And as the world changes and they need to respect, their family's wishes and pursue, to pursue their own goals and dreams, which may not be, these particular pursuits. So if you long to travel the world and seek its most enchanting and secret corners, or if you fear that everywhere has become just the same as here, then definitely read this book and revel in its wonder. All right, my next book is pick is Life in Three Dimensions by Shigehiro Oishi. And this book adds to the growing body of health and wellness researchers exploring not just how to avoid a bad or painful life, but how to actually build a good one. Both philosophy and science have argued for two common paths to the good life, and that is happiness and meaning. But Dr. Oishi is a psychologist and professor at the University of Chicago. And in this book, he uses not only his research, but his personal story and a number of case studies to argue that there is a third path, that of psychological richness. And he defines this as a pursuit of varied experiences and challenges. And this can be like big life decisions, like taking a job in a foreign country, or really small decisions like trying a new restaurant on a whim, or kind of challenging projects like learning to play an instrument. And he gives plenty of suggestions for how to create more psychological richness in your life. And when he talks about his research, one of the research projects that he discusses is having his team analyze obituaries of both famous and regular people to code for evidence of a happy, meaningful, and or psychologically rich life. And many people had one of the three. Some had two, but it was a lot more rare to have all three. And these were like truly remarkable lives. And doing this allows you to have a life that's lived in three dimensions, right? Happiness, meaning, and psychological richness, hence the title of the book. I was really reminded of this very recently when the poet Andrea Gibson recently passed away from cancer this week. Friends posted an obituary on their Facebook page that's been making the rounds of the internet. And so please indulge me in reading a longer passage from it, because it really sort of exemplifies this. So it begins with a quote from Gibson, quote, "Whenever I leave this world, whether it's 60 years from now, I wouldn't want anyone to say I lost some battle. I'll be a winner that day," end quote. And then the friends go on to describe Gibson this way, quote, "Andrea Gibson was a winner today. On July 14th at 4:16 a.m., Andrea Gibson died in their home surrounded by their wife Meg, four ex-girlfriends, their mother and father, dozens of friends, and their three beloved dogs. Poet laureate of Colorado, world touring spoken word artist, author of 7 books, Calais, Maine High School state-based basketball champion, and the subject of the award-winning documentary Come See Me in the Good Light, and so much more. Andrea Gibson accomplished much in their 49 years on this planet. Though Andrea desperately wished to have lived a longer life, they could not have possibly lived a fuller one. Since learning they had cancer in 2021, Andrea has been a champion of finding beauty in unlikely places and gratitude in their hardest hours. Over the last 4 years, they danced with their diagnosis and continually aimed for their internal compass toward joy. One of the last things Andrea said on this plane was, 'I effing love my life.'" They use the actual word, but I'm using the redacted version. And so, if that isn't a three-dimensional life of happiness, meaning, and psychological richness, then I don't know what is. And I hope that at the end of my life, whenever that comes, I can say the same for mine. All right. And then each of us has a forthcoming pick. So, a book that is going to come out a little bit later this year. And so, my pick is Obsession, The Life and Times of Octavia E. Butler by Susanna M. Morris. It comes out next month on August 19th. Um, and kind of linking to my previous pick, this explores another three-dimensional life, that of award-winning science fiction author Octavia Butler. She was a pioneer as the first African-American woman to make a name in the science fiction genre. You might be familiar with her novel Kindred, which is about a Black woman who travels back in time to interact with her enslaved and enslaver ancestors. It was made into a movie in 2020, and it's often read in school. And also her 1993 dystopian novel, Parable of the Sower, got a lot of buzz last year because it was set in 2024 and it presciently had a lot of parallels to today's world. But the author of this book, Susanna Morris, is a cultural critic, and she uses letters, interviews, and other primary sources to explore Butler's life and place her within the movements and events of the day. Morris sees, quote, positive obsession as the driving force behind her amazing literary career. This phrase comes from a Butler quote where she states, quote, positive obsession is about not being able to stop just because you're afraid and full of doubts. Positive obsession is dangerous. It's about not being able to stop at all, end quote. So if you want to find out more about Octavia Butler and how she fits into the social and literary movements of the time and how she still affects the sci-fi genre today, and then check out this book, which Publishers Weekly calls, quote, a moving study of the life and creative pursuits of a literary pioneer. So those are all my picks, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Harry. So take it away, Harry. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Unlike the main character in my first book, The Art Spy, I cannot lie. This is my favorite book of my picks. This is one of Publisher Weekly's top nonfiction summer reads for 2025. Now, the main character in this nonfiction book, Rose Vallard, was a working class educated, art school educated art curator. She could not get hired by the Louvre. So she was working at a lesser museum in 1944 Paris as the Nazis were rushing to scoop up the last remaining art to ship for the Fuhrer's art museum and also for private collections in Germany. What did Rose do? Now, the Nazis were immaculate about keeping records, but what they didn't realize is that poor nobody Rose was also keeping meticulous records of what they were taking and also misleading them about what art they were getting. What's ironic is that Paris was a scene of great art prior to World War II. Pablo Picasso was there, for example. Hitler considered modern art to be decadent. So if it's that decadent, why were they stealing so much of it? Over 650,000 pieces were stolen. Not all of them were recovered, but thanks to Rose and her immaculate records, a lot of it was. There's still over 100,000 pieces unaccounted for. This is a very well-researched book about a strong, intelligent, independent woman who worked with other art lovers to help recover art after the war. She worked with the Monuments Men. And all I can say is the book is very fast-paced, has photos. I learned a lot reading it, and I would highly recommend it. My second book, No One Was Supposed to Die at This Wedding. So this is number 2 in a series, but you can read it as a standalone. Eleanor is going to her best friend's wedding in Catalina Island in California. Eleanor is at the wedding and she gets a note from somebody saying someone is going to die at this wedding. And of course, this being a closed room mystery, there's a storm. And so all these characters who all have secrets are trapped at this resort and somebody's going to die. So Eleanor has to figure out with her boyfriend, Oliver, who committed the murder. We have a dysfunctional family drama. We have her ex there. We have quirky characters. And unusual for a mystery, but it works here, we have the main character, Eleanor, breaking what's called the fourth wall. She has footnotes in the book where she tells you, the reader, what she thinks of different characters and what progress she's making towards solving the mystery. So it's a legitimate mystery, but it's also got a snarky main character who narrates the book, and it's a lot of fun. So I enjoyed this one. Hopefully you would too. My next book, all right, so now I'm going to get serious on you. Mansion Beach is basically a gender-flipped Great Gatsby. We have a novel full of scandal, secrets, and some love. Nicola quits her job at a high-powered law firm and moves to a cottage on Block Island, Rhode Island, owned by her cousin David's rich in laws. Juliana owns a designer clothes startup and gives legendary parties in her mansion. What Nicola doesn't know is that when Juliana says to Nicola, "Why don't you invite David to one of my legendary parties?" Nicola doesn't know that David and Juliana had a relationship before David got married. Uh-oh. So we're going to have some drama here. Also, there's a dead body. Who died? You don't find out until much later in the book. And David's in laws want to tear down the historic hotel on Block Island and replace it with a spa. So I love this retelling of The Great Gatsby with female main characters. So I would recommend this book. I think this is a totally great summer read. And in fact, I tried to pick books that were either set in a vacation location or on the beach. My next book, On Fire Island, is number 3 in the Songs of Summer series. Now, Julia is an editor, a book editor, who edits Ben's book submission, and they fall in love. Unfortunately, at the very beginning of the book, Julia dies of cancer. So you're thinking, this book can't be for me. This cannot be a summer read. Well, actually, it is, because it's not a down and out book. It's not depressing. Julia decides to stay on Fire Island for one more season to see how everybody recovers from her death. She was a loving wife and mother, and she realized that she was dying of cancer, but was okay with it. I mean, what could she do? So we have an uplifting, positive tone as we see some of the antics of her son he's about to go to college. I don't want to be too specific, but he wants to become an adult. Let's just leave it at that. And also, her best friend Renee wants to find a boyfriend. Well, she tries. And what about her husband? What about Julia's husband, Ben? Is he going to recover? So it's got a positive tone, has a great ending for everybody. I would recommend it. All right, if that was too depressing for you, I'll move on to a rom-com, code word romance. So I did enjoy this book too. It's a male-female first-person account romance. Max works odd jobs in Italy, and he's recruited by the CIA. Why? Because he's a dead ringer for Italy's young prime minister who's been targeted for assassination. So we're going to put Max in as a stand-in. Poor Max. He's getting paid, but he's being put in as a stand-in during this assassination attempt. Well, who is his handler? His handler is Flynn. Uh-oh. Flynn and Max had a relationship back when they were 18, but they split up. So now this bickering couple is forced to work together. We have a tightly plotted mystery, lots of action, flying bullets, flying lobsters, flying pigeons. We have humor and great side characters, including a bumbling hotelier named Giorgio, as this couple is racing through Italy to get away from assassins. So there's lots of action, there's humor, there's a little bit of romance. Of course, it's a rom-com. So I think this is a perfect summer read, and the cover tells you it is. My last book, this is an upcoming book. So this book has, to me, Taylor Jenkins Reid vibes all over it. Birdie is only 13 when she's discovered by legendary modeling agent Harriet and transformed into one of Harriet's girls. So I thought, well, this sounds interesting. It sounds just like Billy Joel's ex-wife's memoir that just came out. At 15, Birdie meets a 31-year-old rock star and falls in love. Of course, he dumps her. But in the meantime, she goes to Los Angeles, Paris, Boston, the life of a model. 10 years later, now I'm thinking to myself, 10 years later, she's only 25. 10 years later, she's living a quiet life and she's invited to celebrate Harriet's 50 years in the modeling business. Bertie wants nothing to do with Harriet. I mean, where was Harriet when Bertie was going through all this trauma with the rock star? She got no help. So she has to decide, am I going to go to this reunion and will I ever find happiness at 25? Anyway, I love books like this with a lot of drama. So I think this is a book that I'm going to get when it comes out. I will turn it over to Aaron.
Hey there, Bo. All right. So, my picks for this one are a little bit different than some of the others. I've got a little bit of a different set of interests. My focus has primarily been fantasy, but I also enjoy a good thriller here and there. And so, a lot of my picks are things that felt very fun for the purposes of summer and very actiony, kind of a hybrid of our last two presenters. I also, in my mind, envision a lot of these as things that would make good summer movies. So let's keep that in mind as we go through our first picks. My first one here is Zara by S.J. Jones. This is part of a series of YA novels, but this is the first in the series. So if you want to get into that, this is where you begin. This is a bit of a riff on a classic Cinderella story, but set in a fantasy version of medieval China. And the main character, Jin Zara, if she were just a normal girl with the problems she's got, that would be enough. Taking care of a blind stepsister, worrying about rent after her alcoholic and abusive stepmother drinks half of her earnings, and occasionally managing to get a borrowed romance novel that she has to return in pristine condition. But she also has a deeply inconvenient secret in this world in that she is a potent magician in an empire that wiped out the vast majority of them after a war about 20 years before the story got started. Yeah, this is pretty standard for YA where you just heap problems on the female lead. While she tries to keep herself out of danger and her magic hidden, but being a good, dutiful daughter, a chance encounter with a strange young man leads her to discovering a secret society of surviving magicians, and she quickly finds herself embroiled in romance, danger, and a romantic summer festival in a world much bigger than she ever expected to be dealing with. If you enjoyed things like Cinder or the Nightmareverse series by L.L. McKinney, this will probably appeal to you since those are also kind of retellings and updates of classic fairy tales combined with other things. You might enjoy this if you like seeing the early embers of love stories and a healthy dose of anime tropes if you're a fan of that, because this book draws heavily, not just from those other influences, but anime, particularly Sailor Moon, being probably the strongest influence of the bunch. Moving on to the next book in our list. This one, if you're a little bit older or you just enjoy a good thriller, you might be familiar with. But if you're not, this is Prey by Michael Crichton, and another one that I think would make a very good summer blockbuster. Uh, this story follows a guy named Jack Foreman, a software engineer who went from developing programs for computers to solve problems by mimicking and emulating animals to being a stay-at-home husband. So we went from high-end programmer to Mr. Mom. And he's getting his bearings on it, but suddenly he gets called in to help with a problem. A terrifying accident has occurred. Turns out his wife's company was developing self-sustaining nanomachines, plus complex artificial intelligence that causes these things to behave like a dangerous predator. And now we see why they picked Jack off of the floor here. In addition to that problem, he's brought in to help solve a problem and destroy the tech, only to find out that everything is so much worse than he ever intended or planned on dealing with. And this situation is incredibly dangerous in a way he was not prepared for. If you know Crichton, you probably know him from Jurassic Park. This is another reason that I'm thinking about the whole movie thing. And this is another example of him kind of showcasing the dark side of new tech, which feels really apropos considering the surge we're seeing in so-called AI technology right now. You might enjoy this if you enjoy a good thriller, if you like seeing kind of where science fiction was, because I remember reading this somewhere in the early 2000s, and I think it came out in the 90s. So if you kind of like seeing how sci-fi has evolved over time and how some ideas are still kind of coming around and how they're used, this might be a fun book for you. So yeah, Michael Crichton's Prey, good time, and once again, very self-contained story. Next up, my concession to my particular brand of epic fantasy enjoyment. This is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. Now, this one is full of a lot of great fantasy stuff, fallen civilizations of immense power and magic that are now rotting and ruined in the world. There's political marriages, scheming priestly diplomats, untimely deaths. And all of this is set up in a very epic tale that also manages to be self-contained into a single volume. 10 years before the story begins, a curse caused the magical city of Elantris to fall to ruin and decay. Its people are now reduced to wretched leper-like beings, and the shining former capital of the nation has become a lawless open-air asylum where the people living inside cannot heal from injury. Think about that. The horror of stubbing your toe and it hurting forever. That would drive a lot of us mad, and that's what's happened to the people inside Elantris. But the story follows a woman named Princess Serene, who came to this new capital of Kay in the hopes of cementing an alliance that would protect her home nation and this new one from a powerful militaristic and expansionist religious empire. At the same time, it follows Raudin, a recent exile to the city. Spontaneously afflicted with the same curse as the residents, his optimism in the attempts to help the people within the walls may just be the catalyst to both solving the mystery of the city's fall and the key to its restoration. At the same time, we're seeing Serene maneuver and politic because she was brought here for a political marriage, but the crown prince, her supposed betrothed, suddenly died on her under mysterious circumstances. So now she's far away from home, but the only thing she can think to do is continue her diplomatic mission. This is a great read if you're looking for fantasy that's a little bit different. You're not going to find most of the classic fantasy tropes here. No elves. There's very little touches of Tolkien here. Uh, this is also great if you like magic that follows very stringent and clear rules. This is kind of a thing with Sanderson if you know any of his other pieces. Now, the book does exist in his expansive Cosmere universe, but don't let that scare you off if this is something that seems interesting to you. It's very accessible and solid as a standalone. If you've read other things in the Cosmere or you go on to read other things, it will enhance it, but it is 100% not necessary. Moving on to my romance pick and our next one. This is one I read many, many years ago, but I do still enjoy a little bit. It's called The Smoke Thief by Shauna Abe. This one follows the female lead of Rue Hawthorne, who's carved out a life for herself, snatching up the jewels of England's upper crust as the smoke thief. And while it's a dangerous life, it is entirely hers. And she's good at it. Partially because, well, she's cheating just a little bit, just a little. See, she is a runner from a magical race called the Dracon. These people have the ability to transform into humans, smoke, great for getting into places, and dragons. More to the point, Rue is the first woman capable of making this change in generations, and that becomes very important to the story. She ran due to mistreatment as a halfling. She's half mortal and half dracon. But when the dangerous alpha leader of the group, Kristoff, also known as Kit, turns up in London on the hunt for the elusive jewel thief, they are immediately attracted to each other as equals in a way that neither of them can deny, and neither is particularly happy about. And they'll have to learn to work together to deal with a greater danger when that jewel he brought to use as bait for her disappears. Smoke Thief is likely to appeal to you if you enjoy fantasy romance or you're curious about it and just want to dip your toes into the genre. That's what I was doing when I found this, and I ended up enjoying it. That being said, Viewer discretion is advised, or reader discretion is advised, I should say. This has some historical fantasy elements to it, including some pretty potent sexism from the male lead and some questionable behavior and thoughts. Not recommended without caveats, but if you are able to deal with that and you're okay with your leads in your romance not always being 100% likable until later, you might have fun with this one. Next up, if you enjoy nonfiction, this one is Cultish by Amanda Montell and focuses on from the extremes of groups you may have heard of, like the infamous Jonestown or Marilyn Manson cults, to things like Scientology, or the more benign worlds of extreme exercise fads and social media gurus. The book explores the way all these groups use language to attract, build, and maintain a following for good or for ill. Amanda is the daughter of a cult escapee and someone with her own story of escaping a cult-like environment before being taken in. And she goes through a very critical but non-judgmental look at examining the way language shapes cults and demonstrates how that similar language crops up all over the place in our daily lives. And it's not just about, charismatic and manipulative leaders. The language of group persuasion, what she calls cultish, shows up all over the place as things as dissimilar as houses of worship and multi-level marketing conferences. So this was a great one. If you're curious about how language shapes your thinking, and if you'd like to be better armed against the kinds of manipulation tactics, they're shared both by nefarious actors and multiple industries wanting you to buy, anything from a new fitness regime to get that summer beach body to that new brand of toothpaste. This is a great way of being mindful about what you hear and what you listen to. My last book is an upcoming read. It won't be here for a little while. It doesn't even have a cover yet. We're expecting this one in January of 2026, and it is called The Lord of Demons by Evan Winter. And I confess, this one is the third part of a series, but I think the series again ripe for some adaptations of different kinds. But it is set in a world inspired by the myths and legends of the Xhosa people in South Africa. The main character Tau is part of the Omehi, a people who have been fighting a horrible war for 200 years, and it's created a society that's dominated by raids, fear, and a rigid caste system. Tau is one of the giftless in this system. He's destined to be cannon fodder in the war, and he wants no part of that. He's like, all right, I'm just going to get myself injured, settle down as a farmer. No fighting for me. Yeah, that plan don't work out well for him. In the first book, The Fires of Vengeance, the first book is The Rage of Dragons. And when a combination of coincidence and cruelty leads to his father being murdered by a noble and kind of consented to it by a total of 3 men, he commits himself to a roaring rampage of revenge that leads to him going on literal training from hell, to become the greatest swordsman his people have ever seen. Then, in the Fires of Vengeance, early successes come back to bite him. He draws the attention of the current queen of the Omehi, only for a civil war to leave them vulnerable to attack from the native people of the continent they've been trying to settle on, that threatens to wipe out the entire people. Tau is tasked with leading a dangerous gambit to buy the queen time to reunify everybody and fend off the assault. And I'm excited for this one because Evan Winter is really good at doing a very fast-paced story that combines elements of fantasy dystopia, military fiction, and almost school fiction into a really tight, really fascinating tale. And he is very good at having his main character's decisions keep coming back to cause problems. This one, I think, is going to pick up on a very ominous idea that I noticed in the previous books, that the efforts Tao went through to become as good of a swordsman as he is have consequences. They are dangerous, not just to himself, but others. And it's possible that training from hell may have opened some doors he was not prepared for. If that sounds good to you, you got time to read the other 2 books before this one comes out in January. With that, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off to our final presenter, Sarah, for the night. Thank you all for your attention, and here's Sarah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah, and the reason for my picks and why they're summary, each one has a different reason. So I'll just tell you as I go along. Um, but the first book I'm going to discuss is Murder by Cheesecake by Rachel Ekstrom Courage. You might be able to recognize the women on the cover if you are of a certain age, um, like myself, or if you are uh, a fan of reruns. Um, that's because, yes, those are the Golden Girls, and they are the main characters of this book. And it's supposed to be a series. So, this is the first in what will hopefully be an ongoing series. Murder by Cheesecake reminds me of summer for a couple of reasons. I used to spend the night with my grandparents regularly in the summers, and every Saturday night we would tune into Golden Girls. And of course, the show and the book are set in Miami as well. So, that's a very summery city. Sun, beaches, warm weather, and of course, cheesecake. In this book, we find our favorite girls, Sophia, Dorothy, Rose, and Blanche, in Miami preparing for Rose's niece's wedding. If you know about Rose, then you know that she's from St. Olaf. So naturally, Rose's niece has come all the way from St. Olaf to meet her fiance's family, who owns a hotel in Miami. Traditional St. Olaf customs, like riding a mule down the aisle and having plenty of herring on hand, clash with the glitz and glamour that the groom's family has in mind. Prior to the wedding, Dorothy attempts to get back on the dating scene. I mean, she's going to need a plus one for that wedding. She goes through a video dating service, finds a man she's interested in, and sets up a date. Dorothy thinks they're hitting it off. However, halfway through the date, he starts acting weird. He pays the ticket, but doesn't return to the table, leaving Dorothy alone and worried that she should just stay away from dating altogether. Now, when the girls show up to the hotel to check on the array of cheesecakes that are being kept in the hotel's walk-in fridge, they are surprised to see that while the cheesecake looks to be in mostly good shape, there is a man face down in the fridge, and upon closer inspection, he appears to be none other than the man who fled the date with Dorothy, making her the prime suspect in the murder. Will Rose be able to pull off the perfect wedding for her niece? Can they prove that Dorothy's innocent and is not a murderer? And will there be any cheesecake left over to gather around the kitchen table for a midnight snack? You'll have to read this delightfully nostalgic and fast paced book to find out. I loved this book, so I highly recommend it. And I listened to it, it was wonderful as an audio. So, my next book is The Delicate Dream Department Store. And magical realism has always been one of my favorite genres, but a fairly new to me genre is something called healing fiction. The books are often translated from Korean or Japanese and typically focuses on ordinary people in whimsical settings. And it's the first of two cozy fiction choices that I used for this pick. Um, the Delicate Dream Department Store by Mie Lee is a great summer read for people who want to escape reality for a bit. To me, it's almost also reminiscent of looking for a summer job that might just turn into the career of your dreams, literally. So, um, in the subconscious of people, there exists a world where one can buy all sorts of dreams from a variety of stores. One such place is the Delicate Dream Department Store, where just as you fall asleep, you are able to purchase the type of dream you'd like to have. Penny is one of a community of people and creatures who lives in the subconscious and is the newest hire at the department store. The story follows her as she learns all about the different dreams: childhood dreams, skating dreams, flying dreams, although flying is usually sold out. Um, there are even creatures that sell nightmares. One of the most interesting dreams to me was the ones in which people can set up a time to appear in loved ones' dreams after they themselves have passed away. There are discounted dreams and expensive dreams. There's even a dream awards show for the dream makers who produce the best and most vivid dreams. There's a creature whose job it is to make sure that people who fall asleep in various stages of undress have something to wear. So they're describing these creatures running after these people who are like halfway dressed and like throwing things on them so that they can be covered. And it's just overall lovely. It's more or less a slice of life story with a hint of magic. Reading The Delicate Dream department store felt like a warm hug and made me wish it was a real place. But who knows? With a little imagination, maybe it is. Um, my next book is one of my most recent reads. It's The Fellowship of Puzzle Makers by Samuel Burr. It reminds me of summer because the main character is out on an adventure. He's a young man with an old soul, and he's had a found family since he was born. It all starts when Pippa Allsbrook opened the door to the Fellowship of Puzzle Makers that morning in 1991. The last thing she expected to see was a baby in a hat box, but there he was. What could she do but take him in and show the others? They named him Clayton Stumper, because everyone was stumped by his arrival. They've always said Clayton was the only puzzle they couldn't solve. Clayton is 25 years old now, and Pippa has passed away. And the other members of the house are encouraging Clayton to go on a grand adventure. Little does he know that Pippa also intends on him having a little adventure. She has left behind clues in the form of different types of puzzles, such as crypto quicks and mazes, and they're all clues to get Clayton started. Pippa worked on these puzzles the whole time she was sick, and now Clayton is set to follow the clues, meet new people, and hopefully find out who he really is. One of the best parts of this book is that it actually contains all those different puzzles. There's at least a crossword, a maze, a crypto switch, a crypto search, among others. I had planned on listening to the audio, but at the very beginning of the audio, it said that there were actual puzzles to solve in the book. And so I immediately returned the audiobook and got the physical copy. And I really enjoyed solving the puzzles along with Clayton. Although I did think that some of the answers were revealed too quickly, it didn't take away from the story. I still enjoyed trying to solve them. Fellowship is told in dual timeline fashion, alternating between present day with Clayton following the clues and the months leading up to his arrival through the eyes of Pippa and the other housemates of the Fellowship of the Puzzle Makers. This book felt joyful, heartwarming, and cozy, with just enough mystery to keep me turning the pages. My next pick is another healing fiction. It is The Rainfall Market by Yu Young Wang. I picked this as a summer read because I love when those summer storms roll through. We just actually had one roll right through. I was afraid you guys weren't going to be able to hear me because it was just plummeting down on the roof. And I can curl up on the couch and settle in with a new book with nothing else to do but read. So, rumor has it that if you send a letter to the abandoned house on the outskirts of Rainbow Town describing your woes and misfortune, you have the chance to get a ticket gaining you entrance to the Rainfall Market. At the start of the rainy season, those special few who receive a ticket will be granted access. There, they are able to exchange their tickets for an orb that will grant them a brand new life. Saren has heard about the Rainfall Market, and with her mother working extra jobs, her sister missing, and her dad gone, she feels compelled to send a letter for hopeful passage to the market. When she receives her entrance ticket, she joins the other ticket holders at the house. There, they are met by a great creature who explains the rules, the biggest being everyone must pick their new life before the rainy season is over or risk being stuck in the market forever. Saren is gifted a mysterious and magical cat. She obtains one of lucky few to get a golden ticket and sets out on her way with a dark and creeping shadow watching her every step. This was such a cozy and sweet book with just a little undercurrent of mystery. It's a very quick read. Highly recommend the audio for this one as well. My next recommendation is The Road to Tender Hearts by Annie Hartnett. I read her novel Unlikely Animals last year and loved it. As far as I know, she only has 3 books out, but she is quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. But it's always hard for me to describe her books and make somebody want to read it. So I felt like this was the perfect opportunity to try. This book felt summery to me because of the road trip that they go on, and I enjoyed their stops along the way. When I was on vacation, um, when I always went on vacation, I was never allowed to stop at the roadside attractions. And um, they stop at a lot of different places along the way. So I kind of made me feel vindicated in that desire. um, so we have an array, this big cast of characters, and I'll just go through some of them. Um, PJ is retired, has a drinking problem, is divorced. He doesn't have a great relationship with his younger daughter, and his older daughter died in her senior year. On the upside, everyone likes him. He's still great friends with his ex wife. His best friend is set to marry her, and he's asked PJ to be his best man. Pancakes is the orange cat that has been living at the local nursing home and who was surrendered to the local shelter for being an agent of death. He has found his way into PJ's life for better or for worse. Sophie is PJ's youngest daughter, and they see each other on occasion, but things just haven't been the same since Kate, her older sister, drowned in a cranberry bog her senior year of high school. Luna and Ollie, both in 4th grade, not quite twins, are orphaned and their parents died in a murder-suicide. PJ is their grandfather's estranged brother and the only relative listed as being able to take them in. So that sounds heavy, but hear me out. This is the group that sets out on a road trip with 2 things in mind. Luna is convinced that her real dad is a soap star living in LA, and PJ has found out that his first love's husband just passed away and is convinced that he will find true love again if he crosses the country to find her. Neither of them know that this group is on their way to meet them. While it sounds grim, it is laced with dark humor, humanity, love, understanding, and so much more. To say that I adored this book is an understatement. It is one of my few 5-star reads of the year. And it's a look at how people can be so inherently flawed and so full of love and able to be loved by others. I cannot stress how wonderful this book is. Definitely top 5 of the year for me. And then my upcoming book is something completely different. I feel like this is a little bit of a 180 from everything else that I've recommended. It comes out next month on August 26th. It's being described as Allie Hazelwood meets Dungeons and Dragons with enemies to lovers, fantasy academia, rom-com. And I just think the cover is pretty. So I was like, okay, this looks interesting. And I have played Dungeons and Dragons in my past, and my husband was our dungeon master. So I was like, okay, let's see. And I'll just kind of read a synopsis from the website's, the publisher's website as to what they say, since I haven't read it yet. So Sebastian is 24. He's a grad student. He's in the evocation program, and he's a human. He's the first of his family to go to college rather than the military, and his family's not too happy about that. Theo is also 24. He's a grad student, but in the far more inferior conjuration program. He's a half elf, the latest in a long line of his family to grace the hallowed halls of the university, and the other finalist of the research grant. Sebastian needs that grant to fund the last few months of research for his degree, after which he'll get a job that actually helps people. He isn't about to let anyone snatch this from him, least of all a snob who doesn't even need the money because his family is loaded. But there's something worse than having a conceited academic nemesis steal grant money from you. You could be forced to work with him. Theo is secretive, broody, and his stunning biceps take up far too much shared lab space. But even as volatile as their partnership is, Sebastian just might find himself falling for his rival and it could blow up his whole future. Those are my picks. I'm going to give it back over to Sarah for a little bit of Q&A.
Thank you, Sarah. So before we get to a couple minutes of Q&A, I just want to do some wrap-up housekeeping. So we had some really great picks tonight, but if you want some more, you can try our personalized reading service. This is a form you can fill out on our website where you tell us what you like, and we will create a list of 5 titles just for you and send them to you. So you can find this on our website under the Books, E-Media, and More tab. Also, just know that this is adult summer reading. Summer Reading Club is not just for kids, it's for adults too. It started June 1st, but it runs all the way through August 1st. So if you haven't signed up yet, you still have time. When you sign up, you receive a free book just for registering. And when you complete it, you get this really cool baseball cap that says, I love my library on it. And you earn points by 1 point for every minute of reading or 20 points for attending library events. So you can get 20 points just for attending tonight's program. Some other upcoming programs you might enjoy. We do have the African American STEM Pioneers series at a bunch of different branches. This was very cool. If you are interested in St. Louis history, I wouldn't miss this one. It's pretty neat. And then we have another program like this one, but with fall reads coming up in September. It's not quite ready, I think, to sign up for yet, but I just wanted to put it on your radar so that you can keep that in mind and put it in your calendar. And with that, I think we will take a few questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and make sure we are in gallery view. And then if the other presenters want to turn on their cameras, let's see if we have any questions here in the chat. Okay. So just a comment for Sarah. Someone said that they learned about unlikely animals thanks to you. They loved it and rabbit cake. So, thank you, Sarah. And then I'll answer this question really quick. Someone said that they heard a book described as autofiction recently. And can you say something about what autofiction is? So it's kind of like fiction, like a fictionalized version of the author's own life. So the main character is a fictionalized version of themselves. So it's not a memoir exactly, because it's not always, it's not telling a true story, and it's sort of written novel-like, but the main character is the author. Sometimes I don't know, an idealized version of the author, but yeah, autofiction. All right, and then we had one other question about making lists on the library's website. If for books that you want to read, and there is a way to do that. I'm going to share the library's website really quick. I don't want to log in with using my own library card on camera, but I'm going to see if I can show you how to do this without actually logging in. So just a second here. Okay. So on the library's website, if you go do a search for a book in the catalog, do Aaron's pick, Zara. Yeah, see over here. So here's the book over here on the right-hand side. There is a little tab that says for later. If you click on that, it's gonna save it for you. Now, right now it's temporarily saved there because I'm not logged in, but if you were logged in, it would actually save it there. And then there also would be a function for you to make other lists. So if you had like, I don't know, different genres, right, that you wanted to make lists for, you could make those lists there. And then you would access them, you know, under your account on the catalog. So that's that. Does anyone if this was your question and you have a follow up on that, you can go ahead and type it in the chat. But let me. Okay. Stop my share. And if anyone has any other questions, you can go ahead and type them in the chat. We have like a minute or two left. Okay. They said thank you, that helped. All right. Hey, either any of you, are you reading anything good right now that you want to talk about really quickly before we go?
can go ahead and throw out something if folks are down for it. Again, my thing is very much fantasy, and especially lately, I have been really enjoying fantasy that steps out of kind of the classic European Tolkien-esque mold and things. And I have an interest in African history beyond the Americas, and so and African fantasy. And the thing I'm interested that I'm reading right now, I just picked up today. Actually, came into the library. It's called Masquerade by Sangoyomi. Uh, I haven't gotten to start it yet, but the intro intrigued me enough that I really wanna see what it's about.
Sarah, Harry, you reading anything good?
Um, yeah, I will just quickly say I am about halfway through the second Vera Wong book. I read the first one last year. I can't think of it right now, but the new one is called Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping on a Dead Man. And if you read the Vera Wong book last year, same kind of thing. It's delightful. She's funny. Um, she there's another murder and she thinks everyone's a suspect. It's kind of the same, but it's just also not. It's cute. Um, and then uh, I read the Murderbot Diaries and just finished the show that was on Apple TV, and it was pretty good. I really liked it. So if you've read the books, or if you haven't read the books, they're very short. Murderbot is a delightful being, well, or not so delightful, but he's a great being. And the show was good. It just finished, and it got picked up for a second season. So that's good.
Those are good recommendations. I just picked up the new Lisa Scottolini book.
Harry, we can't hear you again.
Can you see it? So this is what I'm looking forward to reading.
Can you come a little bit closer to the
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this book by Lisa Scottolini about an orphan, a woman whose husband is murdered in front of her, and then she inherits a villa in Italy from someone she doesn't know. So of course there's going to be lots of drama and intrigue, probably a little romance, but Lisa Scottolini does a really good job with this type of book, so I'm looking forward to it. Did you see the question in the chat, Sarah, about AI?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this about books. So everything creative that I have read that has been written by I have not found particularly interesting. Maybe it will become more interesting, but it's to me not very good. Even when it's been asked to like write in a particular author style, I don't think it's that great. Maybe you all feel differently. The other thing about it is, of course, there are tons of copyright issues having to do with both how the AI was trained by scraping, other artists' books, but also when something is written purely by AI, there is some like legalities around copyright about whether that could actually even be copywritten, because copyright is designed for human authors. So, yeah, there's just like a lot of strange, and we're in a strange world. As Aaron brought up with his pick Prey, which was, yeah, as he said, was written back in the 90s. Straight, like now it's all here we are living in the future. So yeah, I don't know how the rest of you feel about it, but
Trying to let me talk about this in this setting would be a bad idea, but let's just leave it at that. I agree with everything you have said. I also have a very personal stake in this one because, in addition to working in the library, I am an illustrator, and these things have had a very negative impact on that world as well.
yeah, even
As for
I think, yeah, even worse.
yeah,
Mhm.
as for how to tell, right now, sticking with major publishers is generally the way to go because you are right, the legalities are weird and the companies that are putting out books don't want to deal with it. So most published authors from major publishers are you're unlikely to have to worry about it. Um, that's a little less true of the self-published stuff, and on some level, that's actually very sad because it means that it's going to be harder for new, interesting books to make it through because they have to contend with all the stuff that I will generously call slop and go from there.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Okay, yeah, I will go ahead and type, if the three of you want to type the title of the book you just mentioned, in the chat, that would be great. And I'll just say too, I just finished a book called Water Moon. It's interesting. Sarah talked about healing fiction. I've been like really into this genre. I actually started getting into it a couple of years ago before I knew what this subgenre was called. And I've read a whole number of them in this genre. And the one I read most recently was called Water Moon, which actually is particularly fun because it starts off using the tropes of healing fiction. It takes place in this sort of whimsical business where it's a pawn shop where you pawn your regrets or whatever. But things kind of go awry, and they end up going on this kind of more traditional fantasy plot line adventure. So if you want to see the tropes of healing fiction, but also a little bit more of a longer book length fantasy plot, then definitely check out Water Moon. So, all right. I think we got all the questions. I've put, like I said, the handout in the chat. So when we finish up here, I'll keep the program running for a couple minutes in case you want to download that. But I will also be attaching it to the follow-up email. When you click on the covers of the books, it takes you directly to the catalog so you can place a hold. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We had a really great time sharing all of our picks with you. We hope that you will log this program and log all of your reading for Adult Summer Reading Club, and we hope to see you at another program soon. So good night, everyone. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.